Larson for Card Player TV, here today with Barry Greenstein. How you doing?
Hi, Lizzie. We haven't seen each other since you were over at the house.
I know, but now you're here up in the room.
Yeah, but you're married now.
I am married now.
So, okay, well, let's do a straight interview then.
All right, deuce to seven. What types of mistakes did you see players making in the event?
Well, most of the mistakes are just because they're unfamiliar with the game. You've got to realize these are all good poker players. That's what we find in this field or the mixed poker field, a lot of events. You have a lot of good poker players who are good Hold'em players who haven't had the time to play these games, mainly because they're not played online. Nowadays, the younger players are learning online, so they all learned Limit Hold'em initially, then it went to No Limit Hold'em, then it went to Pot Limit Omaha. They're all, like, there's a whole group of them who are getting good at Pot Limit Omaha now.
Definitely.
And so the next game for them to get good at, I guess, is probably Omaha 8 or better. And deuce to seven, No Limit, is way down the line because it's just not, just not played on the internet.
Why do you think so few casual players know the game or know how to play the game very well? Just because it's not spread that often?
Because No Limit Lowball used to be a big game in California before Hold'em became legal. When I first moved out to California, that's what I played. And even the No Limit Hold'em players in California were better than the Vegas players, actually, although the Vegas players wouldn't admit that. But when they came to California or when I went to Vegas, I did well, and other people I knew who were the good No Limit players in California had good experiences also. Vegas players will never admit that anyone's better than them anywhere. But once Hold'em became legal,
it just took over.
It's just, apparently more interesting game, certainly a better TV game, I guess most people think. Much easier to understand. I mean, lowball is easy.
It's pretty easy to understand.
Yeah, lowball is an easy to understand game, but maybe it's too easy to understand where it's like, well, there's nothing there. Hold'em, you have a variety of things that go on.
That's true.
Multiple betting streets and different kinds of hands to make.
So the absolute best starting hand, that would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 7?
Well, that's actually also the absolute best finishing hand.
The best finishing hand.
It's not like Hold'em where you can start with aces.
I guess that's true, yeah.
And they could end up not being the best hand. Yeah, you start with a good hand here, it's going to stay good if it's pat. Although if you're drawing, you can start with a good draw and you can end up with pretty much nothing. If you start with a pair of kings and Hold'em, you still have a pair of kings, you don't lose them.
So what skills that you use in other games are also really helpful in this game?
Well, it's still always poker. And the one thing that I saw with these players is I think the one fundamental thing that all good players possess is the ability to make good bet sizes.
Okay.
So the people are raising in for reasonable amounts, they're re-raising reasonable amounts, but it's a slightly different game, and a lot of the people, for instance, in Hold'em, you generally, before the flop, aren't going to call like 15 or 20% of your stack. You're going to probably move in or fold, make a decision right there, because you're most likely not more than a 2-to-1 dog, so you don't want to call too much of your stack. You have enough semi-bluff potential, whatever. You don't put in a big percentage of your stack to call and hold them. In this game, often it's your hand can be so drastically different from a 1-card draw to a 7 or an 8, which in some sense is no hand yet, to hitting that hand and having a great hand. So sometimes you will put in a little more, a bigger percentage of your stack to draw. So I saw a lot of the players just having trouble with the different betting concepts in deuce to seven, and the fact that there are only 2 betting intervals and not 4 as in Hold'em. It's just a different dynamic. And there's some situations where, to protect your hand, if you have a pat 9, very frequently you make an overbet. That a lot of these, especially younger players, are used to always raising maybe 3 or 4 times what the other person did. Well, there are many times in deuce to seven where you raise a bigger multiple, just shoving it in, because you don't want to give anyone a better price on their draw.
Okay.
It's a hand where you know you're going to call the re-raise anyway, and you're afraid if you only put in part of your stack, they call, and now they've gotten better odds because if they hit, you're often in a position where you have to pay them off. So it's a different betting dynamic.
So if you have a drawing hand, should you be just check calling, or would you actually put bets out there with a drawing hand?
There's lots. It's a positional thing. A lot of times, actually, opposite to Hold'em, you bet more powerfully in bad position in deuce.
Why is that?
To take away their position on you after the draw.
Okay.
If you knew you and the other person had the same draw, let's say exactly, and you just called, now they're at a positional advantage over you. And it's much better just shove it all in, have you both draw 1. Now you're back to even. So there's some really interesting situations that come up. And I kind of feel like in a lot of these, I'm one of the few people who understand some of this stuff. It's still a poker tournament. The blinds and limits go up. So I'm sure I'll have to get lucky, and what will often happen is someone's going to have, probably, you're going to see situations where two people have pat nines, which at this stage will mean that all the money is going in the middle, no matter who holds them, and one nine will be better than the other, and that guy will win. So there's, it's kind of like the analogies to the ace king against two queens in
right,
no
that
limit
makes
hold'em,
sense.
where the money goes in and someone wins, someone loses.
So since none of the cards are seen, or you can't see your opponent's cards, does bluffing come into play even more so than in like no limit hold'em or hold'em games?
No, if you guys are watching, I never bluff. Okay, I will always be there like a bear. There is no reason to call me down. So no, bluffing doesn't come into play at all in any form of poker that I'm involved in.
I understand,
okay?
but for other players, do they bluff?
For other players, I think they do. They decide to bluff or bet the second best hand. I don't know why. Lowball is a more mathematical game where it's really more analogous to things we see on game theory, where there's a certain percentage of your bad hands you bluff. Usually your in-between hands you don't bet and have to decide whether to catch the other guy bluffing. And your good hands, you bet, often the same amount as the bad hands that you'll bluff. But there's still a lot of poker involved where you have to gauge whether it's someone who, if you check to them, is going to bet when you're out of position. And you see that happening very frequently in deuce to seven. You check good hands to try to induce bluffs from your